All right, let's go now to our recordings. I think I need to turn this back up a little bit. There we go. All right, let's go now to our recordings, and we're going to go first to Aaron in St. Louis.
Hey, Alan. This is Aaron from St. Louis, Missouri. I have a turf-type tall fescue. So the purpose of the call, I've struggled just like everybody else in the Midwest or pretty much all over the country with these temperatures. But what I'm driving at with this call is the best way I've noticed to get a debate going on your site or the page or anywhere is to bring up dethatching. And I notice you've never really touched on it, or if you have, it's very brief. But I'm just hoping you could shed some light for all us nuts, because it seems to go hand in hand with right around the aeration and overseeding period. I notice you've never really talked about it. So I'm hoping you could touch on it, because it would do us all some good, and especially on the site when it's brought up. There's definitely some misinformation, pro, con, how often to do it. Some people say you should never do it. So I think we'd all appreciate if you would touch on dethatching, when it's necessary, if it's ever necessary, and what the window is that you think we should do it. I appreciate everything you do, Alan. Talk to you soon. Hope to hear a reply. Take it easy.
All right, Aaron, good question. All right, so let's talk about dethatching. We've already talked about it in this podcast a little bit, but now we're going to talk about it in relation to cool season lawns. So there is, the first thing is there's kind of this rite of passage where people love to go out and buy the Greenworks dethatcher, or there's some other company that makes a dethatcher, or rent one, and then you put up your picture of all of the stuff that you pulled up out of the lawn. It's like this rite of passage. Look at me. Ho, ho. It's like Tom Hanks in Castaway. I have made fire. I have made big piles of dead thatch in my lawn. I am such a man. Right? It's like this thing. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. I do. Because dethatching will kick your tail. It will kick your butt, bruh. But I do think that a good majority of that is unneeded. So let's talk about thatch first. And again, let's talk about it in relationship to healthy layers of thatch and why it's there in a cool season lawn. So for cool season grass, up to 1/2 inch of thatch is good. If you're a little higher, that's fine. But up to 1/2 inch of grass, and the reason, or dead material. And that's what thatch is. It's a layer of dead organic decaying material that sits right at the soil line. Now, I don't want you to think that the thatch that's there is always the same thatch that's there. No, it's continually breaking down, and more is being added in as the grass cycles through. So it's not like, oh, I have a 1/2 inch of thatch layer there now, and 3 years from now, well, that's the same thatch. No, it's organic material, and organic materials break down. So I want you to think of your thatch layer as a living thing, kind of, or a constantly changing thing, all right? That's the first thing to look at it like. There's good and bad about it. The good about having a thatch layer at 1/2 inch or somewhere right around that is it helps to retain moisture, especially on those hot days. The sun can't get directly to the soil and suck the moisture out, which also shades the roots. There's only so much heat that we've talked about, and grass and lawns can get too much heat, but it's also the roots. If the roots can stay cool, then the lawn can survive those big heat waves, and thatch helps to do that. It also helps with erosion. You know, if you get big, large downpours and you don't have any thatch there, you could have areas of your lawn that will erode or wash out easier. So that's what thatch is for. But obviously, too much of it can have that opposite effect. It can block water, and it can block nutrients. And as we mentioned before, it can also cause the grass roots then, if they're not getting any moisture down deep and nutrients down deep, the grass roots will literally turn and grow up towards that thatch where all that water is. So there's good and bad about that. But it doesn't mean that you have to remove all of it all the time. So I'll just tell you that in all of the years that I worked for True Green, I stepped on thousands of lawns. And I know people go, really? Yeah, man, I worked there for 15 years, bruh. I stepped on thousands of lawns, worked on many of those, but for sure stepped on them, running service calls, running estimates, running tree and shrub apps. We would look at lawns. You know, I'd run tree and shrub apps, tree and shrub estimates in the summer. I'd run 40 to 50 of those a day, but we also looked at the lawn at the same time, went through and made notes about that. So, I mean, do the math on that. You know, when I was in operations, ran service calls all day, every day, ran out on routes with guys all the time. When I was in sales, I did estimates on lawns, 30 to 50 of those a day. So I've seen a lot of lawns, a lot of cool season lawns, probably more, well, than anybody on YouTube for the most part. That's a DIYer. And I can tell you that in those areas, I probably saw maybe, and I'm being very generous here, I bet you less than 3% of those actually needed to be dethatched. And the ones that did need to be dethatched were in those areas that I mentioned before, where Orland Park, Tinley Park, in those areas where someone had an irrigation system installed and they had the lawn sodded and somebody had the irrigation system on to run 10 minutes per zone every other day. And so they created the thatch problem with poor irrigation from an irrigation system. But I can tell you of the lawns in Chicago, the old school lawns, probably zero, literally zero. I'm just telling you, and you, any of you could test me on this right now. You can go to any old school lawns in Chicago. I'm talking like the K Streets up over by there, Colmar, Kildare. I'm talking about those. Go over there. Go look at all those K Streets up over by there. And you go look at those lawns, how beautiful they are, those little postage stamps. And you tell me if you find thatch problems. You won't find it. You're not going to find it. Go to Evergreen Park. Go to Marionette Park. Go to Beverly. You ain't going to find no thatch problems. Okay? So when I look at, and when I know that, and I see so many people doing this dethatching, I think it's a thing. And I do know that there were people in Northwest Indiana when I lived there were people in our neighborhood that would dethatch every single spring. For some reason, it was something their dad had taught them that, hey, this is what we do to the lawn. It's a chore. I feel good about it. It's kind of like the guy that changes his oil every 3,000, even though now we have synthetic oil that you can go 7, 8, 10,000, but he still changes his oil every 3,000 because that's what his dad taught him. Okay? You do not need to dethatch unless you have a visible problem where your thatch layer is over a ½ inch. I'm just going to tell you. Now, what some people, so that's that. Now, some people will say that, and by the way, you can verify that. You can pull a plug out of the lawn and you can see, and don't pull just one, pull a myriad of plugs. I mean, maybe you only have a thatch problem in one corner and you can just do it by hand. That's the other thing. Every spring I would do hand raking in my lawn. If you look at my videos from Crown Point, I did hand raking in my lawn every spring. There's just some areas that need to be raked out because they get more winter damage than others. And that rips out some thatch too, but that's not a full dethatching. It's just some raking. It's just creating airflow. It's just getting some sunlight down in there because sunlight will break down that dead grass. Sunlight, heat, and then the microbes come up and do it. Again, because your thatch layer is an ever-evolving, ever-moving, living kind of a thing. So that's what I want you to get there. Now, people will talk about aeration being, or they will talk about dethatching being something that helps with seed-to-soil contact during aeration. I could see that for sure. I definitely could see that. But I will tell you at that point, if you're going to be seeding in the fall, and I don't know if I just said that right. Let me say that again in case I said it wrong because I'm thinking about what I said as I said it. People will say that dethatching helps with seed-to-soil contact during seeding time. That's what they will say. So that is true. That can happen. If you're going to rip 100% of the thatch out, then of course, by logic, you're going to get better seed-to-soil contact. However, I would say, though, that you're also doing yourself a disservice at that time because, again, for the reasons I mentioned in the beginning, that you do need some thatch there. So then I would say, if you want to improve your seed-to-soil contact, first thing I would say is, do you need to seed? Just look at your lawn. Do you actually need to seed? Because that's the other thing. People say, I seed my lawn every year. Well, they just do it because they think they have to. But you don't have to seed your lawn every year. If your lawn is thick, why would you seed? Right? I have thick hair on top of my head. I don't go to the hair plug guy and get hair plugs. I don't need them. My hair's already thick. Right? It's the same thing. Why would you put seed in a lawn that's already thick? But again, if you do believe your lawn is overall thin, well, then I would just go with aeration. Aeration's going to be easier because you don't have to rake up all that crap you're pulling out of there. Just do a double, triple, quadruple pass aeration to create a nice seed bed for yourself. That's what I've said in the past. Poke more holes. By the way, when you do the aeration, it also does poke holes through the thatch layer. So that's what I would do. If it's something to improve seed-to-soil contact, I believe aeration is better for that. The other thing aeration does, obviously, is it's going to open up the lawn. So when you're throwing down all of that fertilizer that we also throw down with it, or if we're using any of our starter ferts or any of that stuff, you get that biochar, get that humic acid, whatever. It gets it in those holes, gets it right down into the soil a lot quicker because you open things up by 2-3 inches there. So you're getting things down into the soil, whereas with dethatching, you're not doing that. So that's kind of some of the different thinking I would put to it. Again, I don't have a problem. If you want to dethatch your lawn every year, go ahead. Just realize when you do dethatch, you're also hurting the good grass. You are also ripping out good grass. So Again, if it feels good for you, I really do. I'm just going to be honest with you on this one, and say, Aaron, that I really do believe that most people that are dethatching are doing it for a feel good. I totally know people could argue with me on that, but I just really think people are doing it for a feel good because they feel like it's a thing, it's a chore. But I don't necessarily seeing it being something super duper helpful in every single case.